Hey guys, what if I told you this is the story of a man who could punch faster than your eyes could follow, but also a man who spent hours staring at walls, thinking about life, existence, and water. A boy so small, bullied almost every day, who somehow became a global legend by 32. No, this isn't just a martial arts story. It's a story of obsession, genius, and strange secrets nobody talks about. Stay with me, because by the end, you'll see Bruce Lee not just fought enemies. He fought the very limits of being human. Bruce Lee was born in San Francisco in 1940, which already surprises a lot of people. They picture Hong Kong. They picture crowded streets and neon signs. But no San Francisco first, because his father was an opera performer on tour, a traveling artist, which meant Bruce entered the world backstage. Metaphorically speaking, bright lights nearby, applause somewhere in the distance, and absolutely no stability whatsoever. Almost immediately, the family moved back to Hong Kong, and that's where Bruce grew up. A skinny kid, restless, sharp-eyed, always moving, the sort of child who couldn't sit still even if you promised him something nice afterward. And in Hong Kong in the 1940s and 52nds, that kind of kid didn't necessarily get gentle encouragement. He got pushed, sometimes literally. Bruce was small, not weak in spirit, but physically. Yes, he was not the biggest kid on the block, not the strongest, not the scary one, which meant he was bullied, often, regularly, casually, the way kids do when they sense vulnerability and decide to test it again and again, just because they can. And Bruce hated it, quietly at first, then loudly, internally. You can imagine him lying awake at night, replaying moments over and over. The shove, the laugh, the way people looked at him like he was temporary, like he could be moved aside. Of course, Bruce didn't accept that role. He never really accepted any role that was assigned to him without his permission, which, as you might guess, caused problems later in life. But right now, it just meant he started looking for ways to stop being small. Martial arts came into his life, not as a hobby, but as a kind of survival strategy. Not romance, not tradition, just need. He trained in Wing Chun under IP Man, slowly at first, then obsessively. Hours and hours of repetition, simple movements, direct strikes, no flashy nonsense, no jumping for the sake of jumping. Practical things, things that worked when someone was trying to hurt you. And yet even then, Bruce wasn't fully satisfied. Because here's the thing, Bruce Lee didn't just want to hit back. He wanted to understand. He wanted to know why something worked, why one movement was strong and another was useless, why tradition mattered or didn't, which is an annoying kind of student to have. Teachers like discipline, they like respect, they like students who nod and repeat. Bruce asked questions, he adjusted forms, he modified techniques, he mixed things together, which in traditional martial arts culture is, how do we say this gently, not encouraged. At the same time, Bruce was acting, because of course, he was. He had been appearing in films since childhood. Small roles at first, bit parts, child actor stuff, nothing prestigious. But it taught him something important early on. He liked the camera, not in a shallow way, more like, he understood it. He understood angles, timing, how a body looked on screen, how stillness could be as powerful as motion. These ideas would come back later, much later, but they planted themselves quietly while he was still young. As a teenager, Bruce had a reputation, and not a calm one. He got into fights, street fights, school fights, honor fights, arguments that turned physical because emotions ran faster than common sense. He wasn't a peaceful monk. Not yet. He was volatile, proud, sensitive, easily insulted, which, combined with skill, makes someone very noticeable. Eventually, it became enough of a problem that his parents decided it was time for him to leave Hong Kong. partly for his safety, partly because he might actually kill someone if left unsupervised for too long. So at 18, Bruce was sent back to the United States. Again, not as a conquering hero, just a kid with a few $100s and a very loud brain. He landed in Seattle, not Hollywood, not New York, Seattle, rainy, quiet, polite. A city that did not immediately care about martial arts, philosophy, or intense young men who punched the air while thinking deeply about existence. Bruce enrolled in college, studied philosophy, because of course he did. It fits him too perfectly to be accidental. He read Eastern philosophy, Western philosophy, existentialism, Taoism. He wasn't separating mind and body anymore. He was fusing them, which is where things start to get interesting. Around this time, Bruce began teaching martial arts, and here's where the quiet rebellion really begins. Traditionally, Chinese martial arts were not taught to non-Chinese students. It was cultural, political, sometimes racial, but Bruce didn't care. He taught whoever wanted to learn, because in his mind, truth was truth. A punch didn't care where you were born. Balance didn't check your passport. This decision made him controversial. It upset traditionalists, elders, people who liked clear lines and old rules. And Bruce's response was essentially a polite version of why though. He believed martial arts had become rigid, stuck, more about looking correct than being effective. Too many rituals, too many memorized sequences, not enough freedom. So slowly, quietly, he began stripping things away. What do you really need? What actually works? What movements are natural? What wastes energy? He trained constantly. Weights, speed, flexibility, endurance. His body changed. He became lean, sharp, wired, not bulky, not slow, just efficient, almost unnervingly so. And people noticed. Word spread, demonstrations, local fame. The strange little man who moved faster than your eyes wanted to follow. The man who talked about philosophy while casually knocking you off balance. The man who treated fighting less like a contest and more like a conversation with reality. Eventually, this attention reached Hollywood, or at least Hollywood-adjacent television. Bruce was cast in The Green Hornet as Kato, the sidekick. Of course, the fast one, the exotic one, the mysterious helper. And here's the funny part, audiences didn't care about the Green Hornet. They cared about Kato. Bruce stole scenes, not aggressively, he just existed, calm, focused, unapologetically precise. Every movement intentional. He didn't overact. He didn't beg for attention. He simply was interesting, which is the most dangerous thing you can be on camera. America noticed. A little, not enough. Hollywood noticed too, and then did nothing. Because Bruce Lee was Chinese. He had an accent. He didn't fit leading man categories. Studio executives nodded politely and went back to casting white actors in yellowface instead, which is both depressing and extremely on brand for the era. Bruce pitched ideas, including one that would later suspiciously resemble Kung Fu, but instead of casting him, they hired someone else, because of course they did. This hurt him deeply, more than the childhood bullying, more than the street fights, because this was rejection, wrapped in politeness, smiles, meetings that went nowhere, compliments followed by silence. Bruce didn't explode, not outwardly. He internalized it, turned it into fuel, dangerous fuel, the quiet kind that burns non-stop. He returned to Hong Kong, not as a failure, but not as a success either, just unresolved. And then something unexpected happened. Hong Kong cinema saw him differently. They saw the potential Hollywood ignored. They gave him leading roles, real ones, films that showcased his philosophy, not just his fists. Movies like The Big Boss and Fist of Fury. These films exploded in popularity. Audiences loved him, not just the action, but the intensity, the emotional undercurrent, the sense that he wasn't performing violence for spectacle, but making a point. Every strike felt personal, political, existential. Bruce became a star, idly, comfortably fast. The kind of fame that doesn't ease you in. It just arrives and rearranges your entire life overnight. And through it all, Bruce kept refining his ideas. Jeet Kune Do, not a style, or rather, a style defined by rejecting styles. A philosophy disguised as combat. Take what works, discard what doesn't. Absorb, adapt, flow, be water. He said it casually, like it was obvious, like everyone should understand that rigidity breaks under pressure, that flexibility survives, that identity should never be a cage. And as he taught this, lived this, embodied this, the world finally caught up. Hollywood reopened its doors, this time more carefully, more cautiously, but with interest. Bruce Lee had gone from sidekick to global force, and that didn't sit well with everyone, especially not the ones who had dismissed him earlier. Success has a way of making old decisions look very stupid, but we're not at the end, not even close. Bruce was pushing himself harder than ever, physically and mentally, creatively. He was trying to do everything at once. Redefine martial arts, redefine cinema, redefine himself, which, as history often shows, is when things start to wobble. Part 2. Bruce Lee breaking the world, and then leaving too soon. Now, let's float over to the part of Bruce Lee's story where things start to bend reality a little, where the small, bullied kid from Hong Kong somehow becomes a man who could bend an entire industry, and later, the expectations of millions. And yes, this will be delivered at that calm, gently ironic pace we promised. By the mid-1960s, Bruce Lee was living in the United States, teaching martial arts, and occasionally appearing in small TV roles. Most famously, he landed a part in The Green Hornet as Kato. Now, this role should have been nothing more than a footnote, a polite nod to his acting background, but Bruce Lee turned it into a showcase. Every move he made on screen was precise, fluid, and visually mesmerizing. But here's the thing, the show was canceled after one season. Not because Bruce wasn't amazing, because, as always, timing, perception, and prejudice were inconveniently aligned. Hollywood wasn't ready for someone like him. They weren't ready for a man who was at once philosophical, physically extraordinary, and unwilling to play a passive stereotype. The studios wanted a supporting Asian sidekick, polite and secondary. Bruce Lee, naturally, was not that. He was something else entirely. He wanted the camera to notice speed, form, and personality all at once. Bruce's response was characteristically direct. If Hollywood wouldn't give him opportunities, he would create his own. This meant returning to Hong Kong and starring in films there. And here, the story turns into something both exhilarating and, for our sleepy tone, quietly absurd. Because he was suddenly a phenomenon in Asia, while still being relatively unknown in America, people saw a slender, philosophical man performing impossible feats, and the crowd went wild. The films The Big Boss 1971 and Fist of Fury 1972 made Bruce Lee an icon almost overnight. He did not simply perform martial arts, he reimagined it for the camera. Every punch, every kick, every stance was calculated to look effortless yet devastating. And while the world focused on his physical prowess, Bruce was also teaching his philosophy. Fighting was more than techniques. It was freedom, expression, adaptation. A fight was not a set of steps. It was life condensed into movement. Hollywood, of course, noticed eventually. They saw the box office numbers from Hong Kong and realized maybe, just maybe, they had underestimated Bruce Lee. So he returned to America with a vengeance. And here, we come to Enter the Dragon, the 1973 film that would solidify his legend. Enter the Dragon is iconic, but let's not be distracted by the flashy bits. The quiet part, the subtle part, is that Bruce Lee had essentially rewritten how martial arts could be portrayed on screen. No longer stiff, ceremonial, or purely theatrical. He made it dynamic, visceral, and cinematic. He was finally in control of his image. And for a brief, shining moment, Hollywood had no choice but to accept him. But life, as it often does, refused to slow down or be polite. In July of 1973, Bruce Lee died unexpectedly, at just 32 years old. The official cause listed was cerebral edema, swelling of the brain, but speculation and rumors have surrounded his death for decades, partly because he was so young, so healthy, so seemingly unstoppable. Headaches, a painkiller, a sensitive body, it all led to a tragic, mysterious end. His death sent shockwaves through both the martial arts world and cinema. Fans mourned, friends and students mourned. People all over the world, who had never met him, felt the absence of his energy. Yet, even in death, Bruce Lee remained consistent with his philosophy. His influence could not be contained. He was liquid, adaptable, unbound by traditional limits. His films continued to inspire generations. His writings on martial arts philosophy spread globally. His concept of Jeet Kune Do lives on, evolving with every practitioner who refuses to be boxed in. What made Bruce Lee remarkable, beyond his speed or skill, was his insistence on transcending limits: cultural, physical, and mental. He fought more than opponents. He fought ideas, constraints, and expectation. He turned personal philosophy into action, and though his life was short, the impression he left is almost impossible to quantify. So, in the gentle, quiet aftermath, we remember Bruce Lee not as a man who only punched hard, but as someone who taught the world how to move through life, fluid, unafraid, and constantly searching for freedom. In the end, he didn't just change martial arts. He changed confidence. He changed cinema. He changed how people thought about possibility. He proved that limits exist only in our minds. And though his story ended far too soon, his legacy flows on like water, always finding new paths, always adapting, always unstoppable. And now, as we slowly drift toward the end of this tale, it's worth lying back, imagining that small boy from Hong Kong, and seeing him rise step by careful, relentless step into a man who could not be contained by any rule, any system, any expectation. Bruce Lee didn't just fight enemies. He fought limits. And in that fight, he won forever.